Yep, we got 14 shares already.
Cool. Perfect. All right, let's get this out there. All right, everybody, we're here with Andrew Giuliani, running for governor in New York. And we're going to talk to him about back to blue stuff, less is more, bail reform and everything else, and other important subjects. And we're also here with the little firecracker, Cherie, here, or Cherie, I'm sorry, Cherie. So, Cherie, do you have any questions for Andrew?
Sorry, I had to mute myself. I had a helicopter.
Right.
Worst timing ever. Well, I think one of the questions that we have is, what are we going to do to steer the ship the right way for our law enforcement? How can we get it to understand that no matter what profession, there's good and bad, it doesn't matter, and that one size does not fit all?
Well, first off, Charles, thank you very much. And thank you to True Blue New York for having me. Cherie, thank you very much for everything that you do for the community and just how you put it all on the line. I know you both do. And I know so many of the people that are involved with True Blue New York, they live the words that we all say. So I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. One of the things, and this, I've said this at many of my campaign speeches, and this actually isn't an original idea, but I say very clearly that we've been told some fantastic lies about law enforcement. Now, where did I get those words, fantastic lies? I actually was at Duke University. I was a freshman when the lacrosse team ended up going through the wrongful accusation scandal, and was very good friends with a couple of the guys on that team. The captain actually came out the first time that anybody said anything publicly and said that the media has told you some fantastic lies about what's happened here, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we've been told some fantastic lies about our law enforcement the last half dozen years. The truth is, the media will tell you that law enforcement is the problem. They are actually the nucleus of the solution, not just in the state of New York, but in our great country. The solutions, first and foremost, as governor, on day one, my first goal is to repeal and a full repeal of bail reform. Now, I know people ask, well, that came out of the legislative branch. That's going to take you working with a state Senate and a state assembly, which are two super majorities, against where you might be. I said, well, very simply, this is the meeting that's going to happen on January 1st of 2023. I'm going to sit down with the Speaker of the Assembly and the leader of the Senate and say, my number one priority is a full repeal of bail reform. We have an upcoming budget negotiation, and there's nothing that I look forward to doing more than slashing this budget in New York. And I will not fund your top three priorities until there is a full repeal of bail reform, period. That's what I think about our law enforcement. Look, I think there are many things that right now are plaguing New York. We lead the country in out-migration. That's not just one issue that has caused so many New Yorkers all the way from Rochester to Suffolk County to Plattsburgh and then to Binghamton in the southern tier that have said, you know what, I'd rather go to Florida or Texas or Tennessee. So many issues, but I think the number one issue is the fact that we've seen crime spiral out of control over the last, especially 3 years since bail reform was signed into law. I use Rochester as a perfect example. The national media always focuses on New York City, and we've certainly seen a crime spike in New York City, but Rochester last year had the most murders ever in recorded history. And at least when I was in Rochester last, about 15 days ago, and it could be different at this point now, Charles, tell me if I'm wrong, but as of 15 days ago in 2022, Rochester was on pace to surpass the murder rate from 2021. Whether that's still true or whether that's close, that's unacceptable. I think first and foremost, we need to make sure we repeal bail reform. We need to let all law enforcement know that they're going to have a governor in the governor's executive chambers in Andrew Giuliani that is going to back them every single day. I will ask of myself and of my staff one thing every single morning. What are we going to do today to make sure that we make New York State a safer state. That's going to be the next mindset of the next successful governor of the state of New York, whether it's a Republican or whether it's a Democrat. The next governor that figures out that we need to make sure that we empower law enforcement, that we allow them to be proactive again, that we protect their qualified immunity. One of the things that I saw the other day that a friend of mine who's a member of the state assembly sent me was a picture of, and I don't remember which one it was. It was one of the communists that served ice cream. It was either Ben or Jerry in the New York State Capitol with an NQI shirt. What is NQI? Qualified immunity. Absolutely disgusting. Somebody that is a multimillionaire, probably worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who probably has a fence around his house, who instead wants to continue to go after law enforcement day in and day out. Now, I can give you a little bit of background about myself in particular, and my connection to law enforcement. First off, I had 5 great uncles that were NYPD, including a captain on the NYPD who the last week on the job actually pulled somebody down from the Brooklyn Bridge. So I was every single Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, Sunday dinner. I was always taught to make sure that we respect law enforcement. But what's even more than that is, once my father swore the oath of office and became mayor of New York, I had a protective detail by the NYPD, the intelligence division. And actually, I still communicate regularly with probably over a dozen of those men and women. One is my confirmation sponsor, a retired first grade detective. And another 3 or 4 are like uncles to me, to be honest. As a matter of fact, one of my very best friends in the world, he passed away because he died of cancer responding to 9/11. And he passed away a couple days after my daughter was born. He was the 3rd call after my father and mother to let him know about my daughter, Grace. And he couldn't speak at the time, but I told him very simply, we always used to joke around, I'm Italian, even though I don't look Italian. I just got the appetite. He's Irish, so we always would have the Italian-Irish rivalries and all that, even though, the Italians and the Irish, we always marry each other anyway, but we always had the rivalries over here. So I told him, I said, look, Terry, I know that, I know you want to get up to heaven to get a drink, but make sure before you get that drink, you file your papers because you need to be my daughter Grace's angel. That's who our law enforcement is. What Terry did in particular, and I know I'm being long-winded on this, but he's a great example of so many in law enforcement, not just in the state of New York, but all across the country. Terry, about 32 years ago, he started a program, a Toys for Tots program, which started actually in the narcotics department of the NYPD. And it was just a matter of getting $5, $10, $20 from officers and detectives and sergeants to try to buy, a bunch of presents for those kids that were needy. The year before he ended up passing away, they ended up raising over $50,000, and they donated it to New York Presbyterian. Ironically enough, that's where my daughter was born. So as I was holding my daughter and as I was walking around the hospital, I kept thinking about him. That's what law enforcement, that's what so many men and women who don the badge actually are. They're not just heroes when they put that badge on, but in their personal lives, whether it's coaching baseball or softball, whether it's just making sure that their community is safe off duty, whether it's doing stuff like toy drives like Terry did. That's what so many members of law enforcement mean to New York. So I think you're going to get in a Governor Giuliani somebody who does not get blown around by the political winds, somebody who understands the importance of law enforcement, and somebody who will stand by our men and women in blue to allow them to go in the gray areas that they need to go into in order to protect our communities.
Nice. All right. I have to ask you something. I think it kind of follows in line with like law enforcement and crime and everything like that.
Yeah.
Now there's like the businesses across New York and in Rochester. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that are unemployed, not working. All right. And when they're sitting around not doing nothing, whatever, and not making money, they're more apt to go out and commit crimes.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that kind of falls in line with it. What as governor, what would you do to try to help businesses, to try to create jobs for people, to try to get them off unemployment and everything else like that, and maybe even like cut some of the red tape for the businesses?
You know what? I appreciate you mentioning cutting the red tape, Charles, because you must have been reading my mind. You know, one of the things that I did in working for President Trump for 4 years in the White House was I actually worked on his regulatory agenda. And I know those who have heard me speak before, I talk about this a lot because I'm so proud of this. But his campaign promise in 2016 was for every regulation he'd sign into law, he would cut 2. That number by the time he walked out of office was over 8-1. And I think that's why we saw unemployment drop by so much, certainly at the beginning of 2020, to where it was the lowest it was before man walked on the moon. And actually it was the lowest in history for African American, Asian American, and Hispanic Americans from an unemployment perspective. So New York is, along with California, 2 of the most overregulated states in the country. We need to make sure that our job creators, that our businesses are not being regulated out. I can't tell you how many different businesses, and this, honestly, this is not normally Fortune 500 CEOs that I'm talking to. I'm talking about, you know, three-person business owners, 7-person business owners, small businesses that have said, you know what, I just don't think I can survive in the black anymore in New York State. I need to look at Tennessee or South Carolina or Florida. I have a good friend of mine who is starting and he owns a construction company. He's been in New York now for 17 years, and he's just started to develop now more in Florida and Tennessee. And he says, look, I want to hold on to New York. I have 2 kids. I want to be here, but it doesn't seem like New York wants me to be here. And at some point, there's going to be a tipping point where I say, I love the state of New York, but I love my family more. So in terms of regulation, I think it's so important to make sure one specifically is licensing. You know, licensing is so expensive in New York, and the process is so drawn out that I think that's a perfect example of a way that we can go into Albany on day one and, for lack of a better term, break the bureaucracy. We have to. If we want businesses to thrive and survive here, then I want business owners and job creators to be able to take more of that bottom line and put it back into creating new jobs versus actually dealing with the lawyers that it takes to deal with their regulatory issues. But, you know, the other thing, Charles, and this is one of the things that I think I learned directly from my father that goes hand in hand with businesses, is making sure that we have a safe streets. You know, if we have a place, and he always used to use the example in New York City of Grand Central Station and Penn Station. And he would say, let's say you're on business and you're coming in to Grand Central or Penn Station. And let's say the last thing that you see is somebody defecating, let's say, or somebody with a needle that's shooting up. And you're considering next month to bring your family to a place for vacation. Are you going to be less likely if you see that heroin needle, or more likely if you see that heroin needle to actually bring somebody to New York and spend your dollars, which is then going to help the businesses, which is then now you see that flow right there. And so to me, that's why the number one issue in New York is making sure we figure out this spiraling crime problem. Because if you do that, then everything from business to education, things start to get more and more attractive. And also there's an optimistic feeling. That's one of the things that's amazing, right? If you end up seeing dirty streets that are dangerous, it's just kind of more of a sullen feeling. It's that, you know, people don't see and feel the hope day in and day out. But if you end up walking through the streets and you feel good, you feel fine, walking, in my case, my daughter, she doesn't go to school yet, but one day to school, you know, I would certainly feel a lot more optimistic about our future. So to me, it ties hand in hand, the business community and making sure that we fix crime. And then obviously, and I'll be short-winded on this one, and this will be a battle with the legislature, but certainly a battle that I'm looking forward to. We have to cut taxes. It's absurd how high taxed we are in New York. We continue to compete with California to be the highest tax state in the country. And that's why, whether it's property tax, which I know is county by county, but we have some of the highest property taxes in so many of the counties across the state of New York, or whether it's income taxes or business taxes. It's a massive problem that we need to make sure we deal with directly with the legislature.
So I think in everything you just said there, along with that is this whole can of issues that have come in that we have now laid upon our law enforcement officers to contend with. Well, meanwhile, everything else has been cut in order to give them the supports to contend with it. How do we help address the fact that we are now looking at our law enforcement, our first responders to come in and not only be the mental health crisis person, but they're also supposed to be treating these addiction issues and then dealing with, the bail reform issues. And, it doesn't matter that, you were released because you were a nonviolent offender and this one's a violent offender. You're all under the same umbrella. What do we do to restore some of these programs here that now the gears don't work together?
Yeah.
Because we moved them all.
Look, it's not feasible to continue to put more and more onto the shoulders of our officers and detectives all across the state, while public sentiment continues to build against and against, because we have a media that, wants to vilify our police officers. So to me, I think this is one of the things I know I mentioned earlier about cutting the state budget. We have a $220 billion budget. For comparison, Florida's is $97 billion. Florida has 1 million more people. So they're obviously a lot more efficient with what we do. But the one thing that I look at, and I'll give a good example, if you think about Ronald Reagan in the early 80s, he wanted to make sure that he cut and balanced the budget each and every year that he was president. But the one thing that he didn't sacrifice was on defense spending. And he did it specifically because he wanted to get into an arms race with the Soviet Union, because he knew that it would put so much pressure on a weak economy that the Soviet Union had that they would collapse. That's the way that I look at our law enforcement here in New York. I want to make sure that our law enforcement are fully funded, and I actually would propose a multi-billion-dollar refunding of the police to make sure that we have the resources to not just rehire officers, but that way we're offering competitive salaries amongst the United States of America, so we can start attracting some of the best talent again. Here's a good example. Looking at the tier 2 versus tier 5 pension benefits. I think tier 5 and tier 6, I should say. I would absolutely want to explore going back to tier 2 pension benefits, because one of the things that my confirmation sponsor and Terry and all the men and women who used to guard me and who was still very close with used to say was, look, I know I'm not going to get rich being a police officer or a detective, but I also know that my family is going to be safe and that we're going to have good benefits. When we went from tier 2 to tier 5, now we're talking about such a massive cut into our pensions that we stopped attracting. I don't want to say we stopped attracting, because you still had many good men and women who decided that they want to get into law enforcement because they are doing it for the right reasons. But just like anything, when the free market works, we're going to stop. We have attracted less of those great, talented officers in the state of New York. And they've looked at other places like Pennsylvania, like Florida, which DeSantis has been doing masterfully over the last year in saying, hey, I know you're not being treated right in New York. Come on down to Florida. That's what we need to do in New York. We need to be competitive again from a salary standpoint, from a pension standpoint. So to me, I look at that as being key to make sure that we are attracting some of the top talent in law enforcement across the country.
And that's a really, really valid point, because when they did change the tier systems for any public service worker that's doing this, it really did affect things. So while you went in with the right attitude because you wanted to help and things, you knew if something happened to you, at least your family would be okay. And you were trying to help make the world a better place. And now you're like, well, I'm not making any money. I can barely feed my family. I have to work 2 jobs. And if something happens to me, I don't think my pension's going to take care of them. So it's a very valid point on the pension system and those tiers and things that a lot of people don't understand what those tiers did and how much more difficult it has made things. So the people that are out there right now, I do think are really, most of them are in there for the right reasons, because they're not going to get anything in the end the way the tiers are now.
Yeah.
And you don't have a way to go into those lower tiers.
Yeah.
Charles.
Yeah, I think
I was waiting for a response. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Look, I think I couldn't agree anymore. I think it's look, like I said, I view it as making sure that we are competitive with the best law enforcement states in the country. That way we keep our talent, attract our talent, not to demean our police or public servants in any way, to compare them to athletes. But think about a college football coach when they're taking over a program in a state. The first thing they do is say, well, what talent do we have in the state that we can keep on our roster? What are we losing? And I think New York, we're losing some of our talent right now, unfortunately, and understandably so. I want to make sure that we're keeping our talent, and not only that, maybe we're attracting some of the best law enforcement officers from around the country and around the world. I couldn't agree more. And I think whether it's pension benefits, whether it's competitive salaries, I look at that as being so important. Plus, in pushing back against the narrative of defund the police, I think it's so important to make sure that we stand very strong on making sure our police are fully funded and actually giving a raise, period. I think it's more than even just the actual mechanics and the numbers behind it. There's also a sentiment to doing that says, you know what, law and order is back. Like I said, one of the things that I saw in New York in the mid 90s was a change specifically in New York City, where you had over 2,000 murders a year in the early 90s. That number by the late 90s dropped to under 600 murders a year. Now, that didn't happen overnight. It happened pretty quickly, but you could tell within the first 6 months of 1994 that there was a different sheriff in town, and they were not going to tolerate a lack of quality of life, period. That's one of the things that we need to establish very early on, that I plan to establish very early on in my administration, which say, hey, we are not going to tolerate any of this lawlessness. And by the way, one of the things that I have not mentioned so far, which I want to be very, very clear about, is any district attorney in the state of New York who decides to violate their oath of office by recategorizing or reclassifying entire categories of crime, I would fire. You have the right under, my dyslexia is going to get to me here, but I believe it's Article 13, Section 8B of the New York State Constitution, to fire any of the 62 district attorneys. Any district attorney, including the district attorney in my county, Alvin Bragg, will get their pink slip if they choose not to prosecute armed robbery or resisting arrest.
All right, I have a couple of things real quick. First, I just want a quick answer, because then I have a follow-up with something else. I always like to ask people this, because this is important to me. I think it's important to a lot of people. The Constitution, as it's written, or how it's perceived?
As it's written.
Perfect. All right. Now, that's what I like to hear. Anyways, I always throw that at people to see what kind of response I get.
Good.
Because some people think it's how it's perceived. It's not how it's perceived. I believe it's how it's written. It's stated perfectly right there. So anyways, I wanted to mention that True Blue New York started because of I saw what was happening to law enforcement in New York. I saw different things happening with the unions and stuff, writing letters and stuff to Cuomo, et cetera. And I saw that that there was possibilities of like we did not want chaos. I did not want chaos on the streets. And I saw we're kind of like where it was leading to, where there's going to start being chaos on the streets with the defunding of the police and everything else. But the question I have for you is, a lot of people, I just want to make that point, but a lot of people are kind of tired of like the lip service from politicians, et cetera. Right? A lot of people get lip service and this
Yep.
and that, whatever. Do you believe in the promises made, promises kept theory?
Do I believe in promises made, promises kept? I mean, look,
Exactly.
with a father like Rudy Giuliani and with a boss like Donald Trump, if I didn't believe in it, then I wouldn't have had a job very long, and I wouldn't have been allowed to eat at the dinner table. We'll put it that way.
All right, good. I have to bring this up real quick, then I'm done with my questions. All right, or am I
Please.
talking?
Well, and what I would love to do is, Charles, Cherie, I would love for you to ask you for a little bit of advice. What do you think, particularly on day one, from an action item that you, the True Blue, would like to see from a governor? But go ahead and complete your point there, Charles. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine. I'll let you know right now. I still want to continue on later, but repeal bail reform. Get rid of it. Less is more. Get rid of it. Red flag laws. Get rid of it. All right. Anything that's unconstitutional, get rid of it. That's what I'd like to see on day one. I'm 100% Constitution. I love the Constitution. I believe in it, and that's what I want to see out of a governor is to stick to the Constitution 100% of the Constitution 100% of the time. That's my belief.
And honestly, the reality is, if our families aren't safe, we're not safe. And that covers crime, that covers being able to live, that covers the whole gamut of it all. And, everything needs to go back to that family. We need to be able to take care of that. We need to be able to walk our kids down the street and not have to worry about it. We need to be able to send our kids to school and not worry about them getting shot when they come off the school bus, like we're seeing so much of. So if we don't have that safety first, if we don't have our law enforcement, if we don't have the regulations in place to protect us from the criminals, then how can we have a family and say we're okay?
Yeah.
It all comes back to that.
Well, Cherie, to your point, and Charles, to your point about promises made, promises kept, I think one of the things that you'll see specifically about me in terms of my experience and what I've gone through, whether it's personal and kind of living through the Giuliani administration in New York City, or whether it was professional in working with President Trump for the last 4 years. I know exactly what's coming for me on day one of my administration. I know exactly how they're going to try to tear into me day after day. And I am, I think, as prepared as probably almost any candidate who's ever run for this office is for that onslaught. I think 4 years in the Trump White House gets you as hardened and prepared for that as possible. What I also know is it is so important to make sure that we don't back down and we don't get blown around by those political winds for our law enforcement officers, but not just for our law enforcement officers, for our communities and as well, for our safety. Look, there are going to be some crises throughout my administration. We're going to have things that happen where if we're proactively policing, there are going to be gray areas that end up happening. We need to make sure we stand by our officers as long as they aren't willfully doing something illegal. Do something willfully illegal, that's a different story. I think just like any private citizen at that point, you had held to the full extent of the law. But for those officers, for those detectives that are proactively policing, that go into gray areas, that are trying to make their communities better, that have the right intent, I will back them up every single day, period.
Yeah, I get that promises made, promises kept, that you could try to do things, but there's gonna be a lot of forces against you. I get that. There's gonna be a lot of forces. So, but it's like the attempt, as long as people see the attempt, the drive to try to make things right, I think that would probably work good enough. And people see things through things, people see through things.
Well, Charles, I have to tell you, for me, in looking at this, and I understand, the college try and certainly the attempt and all that. But for me, this is very simple. The reason why I got into this and decided to run for governor is because I saw how our state was crumbling. And I knew that we could fix this, that it was there. Trying and failing is not going to be something that I would be acceptable with. We have to get this done, period. Because the truth is, Charles, there is a playbook that works. We can do this. This is not reinventing the wheel. I certainly, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to change the state. If you did, then I'm the wrong guy, because I am far from a rocket scientist. But what I could tell you is you're going to have somebody in office, in Andrew Giuliani, who is tough as nails, who's going to stand by our law enforcement, who's going to make sure that we get our murder, our violent crime numbers down year after year after year. Whatever it takes to do that, that is the number one priority in my administration, period.
All right, I have one more thing. New York Leap organization. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar.
All right. Is that something that you might be interested if you get in, as far as like maybe try to help funding or something
But
like
Charles,
that?
if you would tell me a little bit more, because I frankly I'm drawing a little bit of a blank right now. So tell me a little bit more.
I believe Roberta might have mentioned it to you one time. New York Leap organization. It's a nonprofit organization that helps first responders and law enforcement who are going through some troubled times. It's free for the law enforcement and first responders, and it's all through donations and everything, and it's all private. So if a law enforcement or first responders having some PTSD type situation where they're struggling through things, they can go to New York Leap, NYLEAP.org, and they can receive help, and it's all confidential.
Okay.
Right? So it's something that New York Leap is like, it's all funded, it's all voluntary. They don't make any money off of it. Like I said, it's a nonprofit organization, and more or less, I've been working with Roberta on this also, is just try to get it maybe government funded or help from the government to try to help them, because there's a lot of that going on out there. All right.
Yeah.
You also have somebody I know like Dave Lippa, who does the 22 a day stuff. He'll be there at on June 5th. And he'll be, he talks a lot about that. And I think he's also trying to look for funding, because this is all about first responders and law enforcement. They see horrible things, just like what they saw in Buffalo, which was a horrible, tragic situation. And they see a lot of stuff like that. And it's got to get to them. I mean, they might not talk about it, but it's got to get to them to see something like that, to walk into a store like that and see all that blood and gore and everything. It's got to affect them somehow. So that's what the New York Leap is about. And that's what Dave does with the 22 a day. But is that something that you would be looking to look into as far as funding or help fund these organizations a little bit?
Yes, it would. If we're talking about our officers and our detectives' mental health and making sure that we're funding programs that would go directly to them. And look, I remember talking now a little bit about New York Leap. Just like any program, I'd want to make sure that it's as good as much of those, as many of those. If you're donating $1, if the state is giving $1, as many cents as possible is actually getting to our officers, then yes, I would absolutely want to make sure that taxpayers would be able to fund something like that. I think something like that is actually a very good mission for taxpayer dollars. So the answer would be yes. We need to make sure that we're supporting our officers. And you're right. We talk a lot, obviously, about mental health with our military, and we talk about 22 a day, obviously. I remember specifically talking about that at the People's Coalition. But when we think about our police officers and what they must go through, and when you think specifically about what happened a week ago in Buffalo, it absolutely has to get to our police officers. You think about the hero retired cop who tried to take this guy down. I mean, that guy's a hero.
Yes.
You think about their family. He had a wife and kids that they didn't know if they were going to see him every single day when he went to work. I'm sure when he retired, he put his papers in, went on terminal leave. I'm sure his wife was probably the happiest person in the world that day. And she probably never thought that she would lose him the way that happened after being on the job for as long as he was. So figuring out how we can fund our law enforcement from a mental health perspective, not just from a pensions and benefits perspective, but also from a mental health perspective. Yes, I think that'd be a good mission for taxpayer dollars.
great, because that's what June 5th is all about, is actually supporting New York Leap. A lot of the proceeds are, almost all of the proceeds are going towards the New York Leap organization for that June 5th ride and rally that we're having.
Okay.
Right, I wanted to bring that up. So, Cherie, did you have
Well,
anything else?
I will come in for June 5th and make sure that I am certainly much more educated on New York Leap. So that way I can make sure we can talk clearly about it.
Yeah, that would be Roberta you would talk to about that. Roberta Irwin. She does the Blue Line Ride and Rally stuff.
She's great, by the way. I was talking to her the other day at I think at the Wayne County Moms for Liberty, and she's
I don't think she was
awesome.
at that one. I don't know if she
No,
was at, I think it was at the Unity rally in Gates.
Yeah.
Was it Gates? Then it was
Yeah.
Gates.
The
It was
Italian
Gates.
American
Okay.
place there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was
That's
there.
where we
Yes.
spoke.
Yeah.
That's where we spoke. Okay.
I think she
We
did
get
mention
it though.
something.
It's a whirlwind of stuff. We understand. Sometimes we don't even know where we went.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
But I do think it's important, that we do understand, and many don't, when from our military, our law enforcement, they come at this mental health thing from a different perspective. So they're supposed to be protecting us. And so they don't talk about what's going on, and their families kind of hide it. Now, I grew up in a military family, and I know what that was like growing up with that. It's very difficult, and it's a different life. And, you joke around that it was boot camp. And now that we're all adults, we're like, yeah, we're going to send you over to boot camp and stuff like that. But that was dealing with just the pieces of things that were happening. And now with them having to deal with the traumas that they face from going to work every day, and having to deal with the trauma of the community and how they're treated is very, I can only imagine what that's like for them and for their families. And I know I work with a lot of people, their spouses are law enforcement, and seeing how this has affected them as well. And then when they heard that I was part of this group, they were like, quietly saying, thank you so much, and crying on my shoulder. And so to understand that these are people, they're people that stepped up to do the right thing. And to really kind of get that message out, to remind that they're just like you and me. And, we all are. And my big push has been, there's no one person that is better than another, and no one should be bowing to anyone else. We should be lifting each other up together as a whole and working together to do the best for the next generation, for the generation after, and learning from our mistakes and working together cohesively to kind of make that happen. So that's kind of been my message with people of like, let's really try and figure this out. And it's not anyone's job. And for you, if you are elected as governor, or when you're elected as governor, that's going to be a really difficult piece with where we're at in New York and this division that's been created. How do you see that you're best going to be able to help with that, since it's not just you that has that say? And we recognize that. What are some strategies that you have for that can really bring this back around?
Are you talking about kind of the overarching theme against the defund the police movement? You're talking specifically about bail reform when we're talking about kind of strategies in dealing with the legislature and the media? What specifically, or kind of more overarching?
I gave you a really broad overreach there. I know I did. I went right around there. Because really what I want to know is, how are we going to, there's been a division created in every single problem that's occurring. There's no more of we can work together to find a common ground. It doesn't have to be all this way or all that way. So it doesn't really matter what the topic is, because it's all the same. It's either you're right or you're wrong. There's no middle. So even if you take something as bail reform, then they say, well, the guy that got caught selling weed shouldn't be in there. Okay, maybe I agree with that. Maybe I don't. Doesn't really matter. But if I'm against the whole bail reform, I can't just say you're wrong. They all deserve the same thing, right? Or if I'm for the bail reform, we've got to come back to this middle ground of common sense. And how do we bring people back to the common sense? And it doesn't matter what the topic is, because it seems like that's where they've done a really good job of dividing us all. So we can't even agree on the things that we should.
You
Well,
stop the news in New York. You cut off all news agencies in New York.
Yes, that would
know
help,
what?
right?
Charles might have figured it out right there. Charles, if they didn't shut down the disinformation bureau, Biden might have looked out for you with a line like that right there. Who knows?
I didn't mean to cut in. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut in. Go ahead.
No, look, honestly, the truth is, I think most New Yorkers are exactly where you are on this, Cherie, which is we've lost common sense in some kind of way. And I think that's probably not just New Yorkers that are connected to law enforcement the way that we are. I think it's a lot of New Yorkers. I can't tell you how many Democrats and independents that I've spoken to in the year and 3 days now that I've been on the campaign trail that have said to me, I might not have thought about voting Republican, but if New York State gets more dangerous, I will. I understand that to me, I need to do everything I can to make sure my family is safe, and I don't feel safe now. So I think that's happening. I think you have a loud minority that is out there and screaming, whether it's kind of the radicals in the state assembly, in the state senate, and the media that are pushing kind of what I call chaos theory. And part of that is the defund or even abolish police idea. It's so radicalized, it would never make any sense that, to me, I think in some ways, they're going to make it a lot easier for us to do our job by continuing to push absurd ideas like that. But I think part of that is having a leader, and this is just like you would in a department with the CEO, with commanding officer. You need to have a leader in there who's going to be responsible and who's going to say, you know what, I'm going to let my sergeants, my detectives, my officers do their job, and I'm going to take some of the heat for that when we need to. If they're going out there day in and day out and trying to make the community safer, then and there is something that happens, then I'll stand by them. That's what I learned from the time that I was a little kid in New York. That's what I learned working for President Trump, and that's how I intend to govern when it comes to our law enforcement. I want to make sure that our law enforcement is proactive, I should say, and I also want to make sure that we are looking at theories that have worked in the past, like broken windows, to make sure that our quality of life is improving, and also like things. And I know the media made this a very dirty word, but like stop, question, and frisk. The truth is, when we talk about stop, question, and frisk, and I can talk specifically about New York City because I know the statistics so well. But when you think about stop, question, and frisks in New York City, in the late 90s, there were between 70 to 95,000 stops a year, right? 70 to 95,000 in the late 90s. What ended up happening by 2012, and by the way, while all of that was going on, believe it or not, every single year, the Justice Department, the Clinton Justice Department, which actually was run by Janet Reno, and the Associate Attorney General was Eric Holder, they actually approved of it as constitutional year after year after year. Now now that, I don't know about Janet Reno, she hasn't been in the news a lot, but Eric Holder certainly has very radicalized views when it comes to it. And he, year after year after year, was ruling stop, question, and frisk to be constitution. I think maybe in New York City, where we might have went a little bit overboard, was putting in the quotas. And what happened with the quotas was we ended up seeing 70,000 to 95,000 stops a year in the late 90s. That ballooned up to, and I think it was 2012 was the year that it spiked the highest, 685,000 stops. And so what ended up happening was you had people that were being stopped time after time after time that, were then, being released immediately. And of course, I think what ended up happening was that there started to develop this kind of negative sense to the police, like they're only targeting me because of this or because of this or because of this. So I think in looking at it, I think stop, question, and frisk actually was one of the best law enforcement tactics, maybe in the 20th century in the United States of America, maybe in law enforcement history. I think, to use an analogy, what might have happened specifically in New York City was instead of taking a couple Advil, we took the whole bottle. To me, I would want to look statewide at things that have worked in the past like that, even if they may be unpopular in the media, and maybe it's just a matter of rebranding it, renaming it, but utilizing the same programs, because the truth is it worked. Proof is in the pudding. We need to allow our officers to be proactive. And that was a perfect way of being able to do it. Maybe we went a little overboard toward the end, but in terms of common sense and balance, there's an example.
I think there's like a fine line with that, with the stop and frisk. I think there's a fine line, constitutional. I could see if there was suspicion or something like that, but I think there's that fine line of what's with people's rights in this and that. Like I said, I'm very much for the Constitution. So if something like that were to be implemented, they would have to be really stringent on, you know what I'm saying, more focused on people's rights than anything, I believe. That's my opinion. That's my, my thought.
And Charles, think about that. I think you're absolutely right. But think about it, in the late 90s, when we're talking about 70 to 95,000 stops a year in a city of 8.5 million, you're talking about 1% of the people one time were stopped and questioned and frisked. And obviously it wasn't 1% of the people, but then when you start talking about 685,000, you're now talking about 8% or 9%. That's probably, and then when you put the quotas in, obviously, I think that's when you start losing some of the constitutionality on this, because now you don't actually, there's not a suspicion or a reason maybe for doing it. Maybe it's actually to potentially fill a quota in some type of way if you're getting pressured in order to do that. Hey, you only have this many this month, and somebody has this many.
That's an important subject to talk about, something like that. The quota.
Yeah, and look, I know it's sometimes can be an uncomfortable subject. But look, I'm willing to dig into some of these uncomfortable subjects for one simple purpose. I say two simple purposes, but it's really one overarching purpose: to make sure that law enforcement has the strategies and the resources necessary to do the job in New York, for the overarching concern to make sure that New York is a safer place 4 years after I take office, period.
Yeah. All right. One more thing I have to say, then you guys can have at it. All right. I just want to let you know that I'm not a very political person. All right. I'm not registered as Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever. I look at myself as just me. All right. I don't put myself in any groups or anything like that, but I can tell you right now, I like politicians who are not afraid to talk about the hard subjects that are taboo to everybody else. And I appreciate the fact that you have no problem speaking your mind, coming out and talking about whatever. And I do appreciate that, because a lot of politicians are very skeptical about talking about certain subjects, but people want to hear about that stuff. People want to hear what their ideas are and what their thoughts are on stuff like that. And I really believe, not for nothing, but I believe there's a big change going here in New York. I think people are researching people a lot more. I think people are, and I've said this a few times, that people are not falling for the 70s and 80s car sales pitch anymore here in 2022. Like when, like, hey, get in the car, hey, look how good you look at it. People are not falling for that stuff. They want to see people that are genuine. And that's my opinion. I think that, I think you're a genuine person, and I think you're going to go pretty good here in New York.
Thank you, Charles. I kind of made a promise to myself that if I ever was going to run for political office, that I would be genuine. I've having been around politics for 33 years since I was 3 years old. I've seen politicians that were genuine, and I like to think I'm a little biased on this one, but my father is certainly one of them, as is President Trump. And I've seen many that aren't. And I made it kind of just more than anything, just kind of a promise to myself that I would be genuine on my beliefs, and I'd be clear with New Yorkers and with Americans on where I stood. I said it might not always be popular, but I'd much rather be honest and genuine than not. So, whether you like me, whether you don't, whatever it is, you're going to get at least the truth in what I believe from me.
Well, yeah, you showed it right there when you talked about the stop and frisk. I'm going, I don't really care for that too much, but I like your hey, you're bringing it out there, not afraid to talk about it because there's a lot of people that don't care for that and just that.
Right.
But I appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty, and you think, what you think is what you say. And I think a lot of people will appreciate that,
I appreciate the willingness to hear the feedback too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important. Look, I don't think that I have all the answers in any kind of way. I mean, look, politicians are narcissists, and I think that's one of the places where we've gone so wrong. I think with so many of our elected leaders and officials, we need to make sure that if in order to turn this state around, we need experts, certainly in the field of law enforcement, that could come in and help do this. It can't just be one person or a couple people who are mandating from on high. We've seen that over the last 15 years in New York, and it's failed catastrophically.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or any other thoughts? I did want to mention real quick that, we were supposed to have Mike Carpinelli on, and apparently he had other obligations and couldn't make it. He's been on 2 or 3 times before.
And that's on me. I didn't get to Sheriff Carp till early this afternoon. So I'll put that one on me right there. But Sheriff Carp is, I got to tell you, and I hate to call him even in politics. I wouldn't even call him a politician. But as anybody who I've ever met in the political arena, there's nobody that has more integrity than Sheriff Mike Carpinelli.
And he's for the Constitution. I love that about him.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
We'll have him again.
Yeah. Right?
Absolutely.
So June 5th, you're going to be there, right?
Yes, sir. I can't wait. We have our Giuliani mobile that's getting wrapped right now. So I think we'll have a Giuliani mobile in the convoy. So we're looking forward to it, and I can't wait for the rally.
Make sure you have somebody in there videotaping too, and you're going down the streets with the flags and all that. You got to
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
It's an amazing sight. And I want to put out, because I think it's important that people know that you're actually also an approachable person. You're not afraid to talk to them, and you're not going to hide in a crowd. So I think it's important that they know that, because I think you will talk to people. I've seen you talk to people. I've seen what you do. And that's a big deal. And people need to know that. So I want to make sure that that's shared, that you are approachable and you are willing to listen and hear what people's thoughts and ideas are and where things need to go. So there's something to be said for that. And I appreciate that about you.
Yeah, I do too.
Thank you. Thank you, Cherie and Charles. Look, I learned so much from almost every conversation that I have on the campaign trail. And, you'd be foolish. And I think that's where a lot of candidates go wrong on this. Not all candidates. There are a lot of others that are approachable too, but there are some that aren't, that come in and maybe shake the 2 or 3 hands that they're directed to shake by their advisor and then get out of there. But you're missing a great opportunity to get feedback, to see if the message that you intended to give is actually the message that is important to New Yorkers. So if you're not doing that, then you're not getting the proper feedback that's going to help you govern once you get elected.
Good. I think we're pretty much set then. Are we all set for tonight?
I'm good.
All right. Where can people reach you?
Go to saveny.org, saveny.org. We used to have ny for Giuliani.com, but everybody misspells Giuliani. So that still directs to that. You know what? We had it spelled wrong on the objections to our petition that one of the other candidates was objecting to us on. So which was a good thing, because then they could throw those out. But but saveny.org is where you can reach us. And you could volunteer. We've got 30. I know this isn't political, but we're coming down the stretch for our primary. And certainly I'm looking forward to a debate in Rochester. I can tell you, especially with the organization that's going to do it, which is a conservative leaning organization, we get this done. I think law enforcement will be one of the top topics there. I certainly will push for, and our team will push for it for our Rochester debate.
I know there's another group out there. Let me see here. It's Andrew H. Giuliani for New York Governor 2022.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, that is honestly one of our biggest supporters, and a guy who's been with us since day one, Charles Killian, who runs that. And Charles has been tremendous. So Charles, if you're listening today, I can't thank you enough. I know we were in Buffalo last week, obviously, with the tragedy, and we tried to see each other. We didn't get together, but as we'll be coming out to Buffalo and Rochester a bunch over the next month, we'd love to get together. So hopefully on June 5th or maybe even before that.
Sounds good. I think we're all set. All right. Thank you, Andrew, and good luck, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you, Andrew. Have a great night.
Charles, Cherie, have a great night. And thank you very much, everybody, for being here on a Saturday evening with us. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful weekend. Spectacular.
Right. All right. Thanks. We'll
Thank
see you guys.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.